thank you so much for downloading this talk on symbolism in gingerbread. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about generic symbolism, but I'm mostly going to be concentrating on this board, which is a board in my in the collection of the Museum of Kitchenalia, and we're going to be looking at the relevance of Christmas in this particular board. So I'm just going to put this over here. Then I'll look at that and just hammer later. Let's share the screen as well now, because the world has been fascinated with embossing and printing images for centuries. It's not a new thing. Decorative designs and everyday events have been captured and carved into clay and into metal since man has been given the tools to do so. And that is illustrated really nice in this very early cylinder seal, which is from it is actually an ancient Mesopotamian example that dates to 3100 BC. Pretty old. It's looking not bad at all. And it's in the collections of the Louvre Museum in Paris, and it's engraved. And you can see here the engraved image is then rolled out onto a surface to produce this image here. And it gives you a really nice example of what this how this image is represented here when it's rolled out onto something malleable and it's given that impression. And ceremonial loaves of bread were often marked with religious all kinds of religious images. And there's a lovely example here, which again is very old. And this is a great wooden mould, and it's in the collections of Cleveland Art Museum. And it dates anywhere between the 7th and 10th century. So again, quite an old one, but not as old as that cylinder, but looking good considering its age. And it's thought to have been used to stamp breads carried by pilgrims in Jerusalem. So it's a marvellous example there. As mentioned in the online exhibition, and hopefully you've all taken a look at that, one of the oldest culinary moulds to be discovered in Europe was discovered in the 1st century, and it's actually in the shape of a lovely sort of seashell, and it's it dates the 1st century, and it's made of bronze, and not sure what it's been used for, but it is definitely a culinary mould, and it was found just outside Naples. And interestingly, one of the oldest ceramic waffle irons, which mimics its metal ancestors, dating to around the 15th century, was found in London. And it looks like it looks like a mushroom, doesn't it? But it's like a large stamp with a pedestal base. You can see these really distinctive carved waffle pattern on the oblong face here, which is a great example. But of course, the most graphic and prolific patterns that we're all kind of familiar with, found on culinary moulds, are of course crafted from wood, and these include confection, cake, biscuits, and gingerbread moulds, as well as moulds designed for, more functional things and for educational purposes, more of which you can read about in the online exhibition. It's important to remember that early gingerbreads were really, they were just kind of medicinal, more of the medicinal kind. So they had a variety of ingredients, which was far removed today from what we would recognise as gingerbread. And that would have been reflected in the moulds themselves. So their depth and their intricacies, which would have been designed for a stiffer type of paste. Religious themes dominated the most Renaissance moulds, together with even older moulds, earlier moulds that were created by different regions to sort of promote their various varieties of honey cake, which is sort of like the very early ancestor of gingerbread. Inevitably, politics and propaganda became entwined with the craft, and it was used to elevate royalty and to compete for the most elaborate designs. Nuremberg is a city famous for its precious honeybees in Germany, and it's the source of the finest Lebkuchen, and it's recognised historically for its once renowned crack teams of gingerbread makers and crafters who actually formed their own gingerbread guild in the 1600s. But it was a craft that was already long established in the city, probably going back as early as the 1400s. So both carving the moulds and preparing the dough became a very highly skilled, competitive professions. Like this illustration shows you from 1520, and this shows we actually know the name of this baker. So it shows a gingerbread maker called Hans Buell from Nuremberg. And there are lots of well-preserved boards that still exist in the collections of the Germanisches, sorry, that's terrible pronunciation, National Museum in Nuremberg. So you can go there and see lots of these wonderful molds. Over the centuries, moulds have been carved into fired clay, metal, and of course durable, kind of more durable boxwoods, fruit woods like pear and apple, other fruits, as well as beechwood and elm, and sycamore was sometimes used because it was odorless and tasteless. Very, very practical for moulds. Hard wax moulds were also produced at a much lower cost, and there was a great big revival for this in the mid 20th century, and I have some examples myself in the Museum of Kitchenalia. And some moulds were used to commemorate specific events like weddings and funerals and religious proceedings, coronations, military activities and victories. So think of them as early photographs, a way of capturing a moment in time of people and events, both historical and celebratory. And then there was a later trend for more stylized wood carvings with much greater detail that became really collectible, like riders on horseback, which you can see here. And this is an example from the Gingerbread Museum in Torun in Poland, which is one of the largest of its kind in Europe. And Torun itself immortalized many of its high-ranking Polish citizens, distinguished citizens, in carved moulds, including King Sigmund III of Poland. And a mould of King Sigmund still exists in the collections at the museum, and it dates back to around the 1500s. And have you ever wondered why there are so many moulds, carvings of windmills on gingerbread boards? Well, this is, yeah, it's a homage to the Dutch and their supposed superiority with gingerbread making, but it also represents a nod to the English 17th century monarch William III, or William of Orange, who was an ancestor of the Dutch monarchy. There you go. So not just about flour. So moulds also captured people's occupations, a trend that became particularly popular in the Regency and Victorian era, like this one. You can probably see here, this is a street seller, and this was probably manufactured in Germany, and it's from the collections at the V&A Museum. While other moulds were designed to be gifted, to encourage fates and destiny, with images of dogs and hares that both represented fertility, doves for affection, stags for bravery, hearts like this one, or interlocking swans for love, and pigs for luck and abundance. And we're going to know more about that later. But yes, as I mentioned before, this talk focuses specifically on interpreting the symbolism in a mould from my own collection from the mid-19th century. So I'm just going to go and share another camera with you. Here we go. So you'll be able to see a bit better detail with the mould here. So it looks Let's get this camera angled a bit better. So it looks a lot older than it actually is. It looks very folklorist, doesn't it? I don't want to change the angle too much because it will interfere with how I'm going to move it around. But it's not at all. It's 19th century, maybe a little older, and it's typically Dutch, and hopefully goes some way to explaining why moulds like this had a strong association with Christmas. There's no definitive time when gingerbread became associated with Christmas generally. Its foremost purpose was medicinal, and as I mentioned before, and it became consumed in the medieval period along with various other sweetmeats as the final feasting course, known initially as the void and then as the banqueting course. A whole separate sugar fest. It's not too difficult to determine that as it was made of goods like sugar and ginger, gingerbread personified wealth and luxury, and Christmas was all about excess. So by the 17th and 18th centuries, the cost and accessibility of spices like ginger and sugar became relatively affordable, and soon the streets were full of sellers, and fashion for gingerbread moulds was off the scale, giving rise to the phrase edible mass medium. Both gingerbread and its moulds made ideal Christmas gifts. So let's take a closer look at my mould, shall we? I think we'll start by looking at the ship. Let's just get that. Yeah. Go. Yeah, you can all see that like I can. That a little bit. There we go. There's the ship. A bit brighter, a bit brighter. Yeah, there we go. That's a little bit better, isn't it? So, in order to look at this ship, though, we need to consider the figure of Saint Nicholas. St. Nicholas is the subject of many a culinary mould. I understand the food historian Ivan Day has at least one of note, if not more examples, in his own collection. But this one is from the Dutch Bakery Museum in the Netherlands. St. Nicholas relinquished his wealth and saved destitute women and resurrected murdered children, the latter miracle securing his legend as the patron saint of children. St. Nicholas's feast day on the 6th of December has become synonymous with baked treats and confection throughout the Netherlands. In the UK, we know him as Father Christmas. In North America, Santa Claus. In France, Père Noël, and so on, although his legend is celebrated quite differently. This leads me on to the sailing ship and the broader narrative around St. Nicholas himself. Legend has it that following his death, his remains, originally in Turkey, were transported to the city of Bari in Italy in the early medieval period. This was due to the complexities of war, occupation, and religion. The area of Bari then fell under Spanish rule, and the Netherlands too were eventually occupied by the Spanish around the 16th century. As Spanish troops sailed back and forth between Spain and the Netherlands, a sort of tradition evolved around St. Nicholas, known as the Dutch Sinterklaas, travelling to Spain and the Netherlands every year to deliver presents to local children. So tall ships like these carved into gingerbread moulds, are said to be symbolic of the sea passage made annually by Sinterklaas. Sometimes they even have the name Nicholas carved into the ship's flag. Like this one here. This is a really interesting one from the collections of the Horniman Museum in London. And you see the similarities of the ship here. And you can just make out the letters here. So you've got N-I-C-O-L-A-A for Nicholas. I think they maybe ran out of room for the S. So today, St. Nicholas's passage across the sea involves an elaborate ceremony around November, December time. depending on where you are. It's conducted in a different port each year in the Netherlands and the city of Antwerp, Belgium, which was once part of the Netherlands. So that's our ship, and I'm going to move on now to look at the wild boar. Let me see if I can get that up. There's the boar. Beautiful carving that. That's better angle, isn't it? Okay, so the wild boar or ancient pig. In countries including Germany and the Netherlands, the pig represents a symbol of good luck, and it's still customary to exchange pigs made of marzipan around New Year's Eve in Germany. I'm convinced this links into the old Anglo-Saxon tradition of holding the wild boar in high esteem. I recently both wrote a book all about the food and drink culture of the early medieval Anglo-Saxon era and discovered from my own DNA testing that I'm 24% German and 8% Danish. It isn't that surprising, I guess, considering many of us with a heritage that links to the British Isles will have Germanic and Scandinavian roots. But it has left me fascinated about these cultures. An extract from the Old Norse sagas, known as Edda, contains a story relating to Valhalla. It describes what slain warriors would eat and drink once they'd entered the Great Wall of Valhalla, the mythical place where those who died in combat ended up. In the saga, a cook with the name Andrimir prepared salimir every night in his mighty cooking pot that you can see here to serve all the new souls entering Valhalla. Sarimir, or the wild boar, is cited as being the best of flesh, with the pig seen as both symbol of strength and fertility in Scandinavian cultures. The saga of Beowulf is also full of wild boar references as a sort of form of defensive magic. Pig meat was the food of choice during midwinter feasts, which we think of as Yule today, but was actually spelt more like Geol. These pigs were sacrificed and eaten as part of the wider Yule festivities, which also included the ceremony of Heitstrenning, the making of a solemn vow to the pagan god Freya, made against the bristles of the boar itself. In Sweden, this tradition has been kept alive with the annual baking of the ginger biscuits pepparkakor, often cut into pig shapes, a practice which merges the old Yule customs with the Christian festival of Christmas. Despite the original sweetbread recipe not containing ginger, although it often is now, I had actually wondered if the Mexican pig-shaped ginger cookies of Mananitos bore, pardon the pun, some relation to pepparkakor. But it seems there is no connection, not that one I can find anyway. So if you know of one, please do get in touch. In the early medieval period, the boar was so revered that it was crafted in metal to adorn helmets, which would be buried with other important belongings beside the body. The best example of this is the Gilden Morden boar, originating from around the 7th century, discovered in Cambridgeshire and thought to have been part of a Scandinavian boar-crested helmet. So, my theory is that having a gingerbread mould crafted in the shape of a pig was both symbolic of the pagan Yule festivities and the emblem of good luck. So let's move on to this curious figure. Might actually have to move my camera a bit. There we go. Not ideal, is it? See if we can find this. Good. Okay. So, a lady with her parrot Now, there's great significance around the imagery of women with parrots historically, which I found out from my research, which I had never known before. The Flemish painter Jan van Eyck placed the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus and a parrot in his 1436 work of art, Madonna with the Canon van der Pala, which is believed to represent virginity. And you can see here, there's a little parrot there between the baby Jesus and the Virgin Mary. In fact, it turns out that women with parrots is a bit of a recurring theme in the art world generally. Parrots also symbolise wealth and power. For wealthy medieval women, parrots may have been good company, a reliable companion. But returning to the theme of the Virgin Mary, there's a legend surrounding the first parrots introduced to Europe, supposedly by Alexander the Great. And these first parrots were thought to all say one similar word, which was the Latin greeting Ave, meaning hail. This evolved into Ave Maria, Hail the Virgin Mary, and this association stuck. It appears in medieval poems too, like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and the ballad in Commendation of Our Lady. So the literary references combined with the art and the legendary Hail Mary are enough to persuade me that this female character and her parrot are a direct link to the Virgin Mary and the birth of Christ. So let's recap. We have St. Nicholas and his gift-bearing ship. We have the ancient symbol of the revered pig who had a place in Anglo-Saxon feasting, in feasting Yule legends, and the female and her parrot companion, representing the Virgin Mary and subsequently the birth of the Christ child, which all appears fairly Christmassy to me. So, what could this last carving be symbolic of? It looks to me like a ceremonial barge. They were historically used for leisure and festivities held on the water. Could it simply just be that? A party boat for the Christmas party season? Could it have royal significance, a symbol of luxury and indicative of wealth? I've not come across many of this design. Many royal processions once took place on the water across the globe, particularly in Europe at the height of the fashion for pageantry, during the later medieval period. My theory is that this barge symbolises wealth, elaborate ceremony and festivities, tying in nicely with all the other themes in the mould, which create a distinctive overall representation of Christmas and what Christmas can convey through these moulded shapes. So let's come back to me. There we go. So, when you're cutting out your gingerbread shapes this Christmas, take a minute to think about how it all started. And that's it for the talk. I really hope you enjoyed it. And it's my intention to bring you many more talks like this as I move forward with the Museum of Kitchenalia and I start to develop things a bit more. Please do tell your friends, family, pets, all about the museum, the online museum, and you can find me on social media. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on YouTube, I'm even on TikTok. All you have to do is look for Museum of Kitchenalia. So great. I think that's all for now. Until next time. And again, thank you so much for downloading this pay-to-view talk. It all goes some way to supporting the work that I do for the museum. So cheers for that.